Coffee time with the Awake and Brave. So, still on this book. And like I said, with lots of books, they need a lot of contemplating, if you're a thinking person. If not, you will skip from page to page to page to page. You will think that you're absorbing the information and that you know all about the collective unconscious and archetypes, when in actual fact you won't know about them at all. You've just deluded yourself that you do. And then maybe you'll speak to people about these things and how much you know, when at the end of the day, the fact is, you don't know them at all. You see, to know all this stuff, we have to experience it. If we don't experience it, we don't know it. We just think we do. And that's the difference, isn't it? And so, I go through from page to page, and I contemplate. I ask myself, what does that mean? Have I experienced that? What instances can I recall when I have experienced that? Different things. And so I then reflect upon many occasions when I have had very bizarre supernatural experiences. And I think to myself, well, you know, in relation to God and Jesus and angels, well, they are archetypes. They are figments of human consciousness. They are manifestations and creations of human consciousness. And so it stands much more to reason, if we have an encounter with one of these, then it was a production of our own minds rather than something in the corporeal reality. Particularly in view of the fact that we realise, once we are quite learned, that there is no corporeal reality and everything is mind. And so when I look at the situations, very, very perplexing situations that I've spoken about in my book and in many videos, about angels and demons and Jesus and God and, you know, other manifestations. And I've pondered, did I create them? Did my collective unconscious create them? And when we know about the collective unconscious, we know that there is an unconscious in our collective. And the collective can be global, but very often it's cultural and it's regional. So I've very often spoken about when we have dreams and we have archetypes in our dreams, the hero, the wise old man, the wicked witch, or the demon, all of these sorts of different facets of what it is to be a human being. We can say to ourselves, well, my mind, my unconscious created those, because that's where the unconscious, or should I say, that's where dreams create themselves within our unconscious. And now and again, these unconscious realities penetrate into the conscious, and that's why we wake up in the morning and we go, oh, I had this dream last night, and you remember a little bit of it. But if you stopped to concentrate on that dream and to recall it and to write it down, then you'd be surprised how much you actually remember. And so I did this for a 4-year period, and I have a dream journal, and I suppose I'll be writing a book about the archetypes which I encountered when I was going through a very difficult time. You see, this book of mine is my spiritual autobiography, but there are many other facets which relate to that, and I only speak about some of the dreams I had in the book, when there's many relating to powerful archetypes, figments of the collective imagination. And so I never believed in God or Jesus or angels or anything, and yet I had these encounters. So I have to say to myself, look, I don't believe in those things. So it's not my belief that is creating them, because I discount them. I do everything in my power to discount any so-called reality of them being a real existence outside the figments of our imagination. I absolutely do not believe in the man in the sky. I do not believe in angels flying around, and I do not believe in a man that walked on water. And yet I've had encounters with these egregores, these energy forms. And for those of you, egregore is new to you, and maybe you'll just hear the word and then you won't think about it, and then just like you'll pass it off and you'll continue about your day. But the egregore is a really, really powerful facet of what it is to be a human being. If we are thinking people. If you're not thinking people, you don't need to think about it ever again for the rest of your life. Just forget I ever mentioned it. But if you want to really delve into the realms of what you are, what is going on here, then you'll need to know about egregores, you'll need to know about archetypes, you'll need to know about the collective unconscious, you'll need to be able to interpret your dreams, you'll need to be able to do a whole bunch of stuff. Every morning at this time, I can hear the TV downstairs. This old bloke is 75 or something like that. And in his apartment are just bare walls, just the same as they are here, with the first light cream magnolia paint that they had in this building 25 years ago when it was built. It hasn't been painted since. It's got a brown carpet, and there's a shitty old dull sofa and a coffee table, and then he's got like a flat screen TV. That's all he's got in his room. He doesn't have any plants, he doesn't have any ornaments, he doesn't have any pictures, he has nothing of his own. He possesses nothing that's inspired him through his life to pick up and collect and to bring into his home. And so this is very much a Jungian and Freudian thing, because our homes are a projection of our minds. And there used to be this TV series called Who Lives in a House Like This? And the film crew would go into somebody's house and they'd look around and they'd go, well, look, this person's got this and this person's got that. And then you'd start to build a picture. And then in the end, they'd tell you who the person was to see if you could guess, you know, what variety of person, whether it was a writer, an actor, you know, musician or something of this nature. But every morning he turns on the idiot box, because there's nothing going on in here. In his world, he actually doesn't have a world. He is just programmed matter. That's all he has ever been, all he will ever be. So he turns on the idiot box, and then whatever is coming out of the idiot box and entering, if anything does indeed enter into his mind and gives rise to contemplation, then that's the only thoughts he's going to have throughout the day, other than the very, very mundane. And of course, how better to gain the attention of people than to stimulate them with fear? So that's why the news is always about fear and the negative, and how threatening the world is, and how we need to be, you know, careful out there and keep looking at us so we can keep you informed of all these dangers. So he's gone through his whole life being afraid of what's coming next. You know, there's always a boogeyman around the corner, isn't there? And so when I speak to him, there is never, ever anything which is outside of, oh, I'm going to the supermarket, oh, I'm going on the bus, I'm just going to walk around the street. Where are you walking to? Oh, just walking around. Why? Just to get out the house. Just to get out. Yeah. Well, you go crazy in there all day, don't you? Well, you mate, you might very well. So there was this friend I had years ago, and this is when I was living in Bulgaria, and I'd go and see him in the office, to take care of a bit of business, and he'd have some sort of news channel on the computer or on his phone. And I said to him, "What are you listening to that for?" "I want to know what's going on in the world." And he looked at me like I'm an idiot. And he knew I was into some of this weird stuff. And I said to him, "Look, you think you know by listening to that crap what's going on in the world?" "Yeah." "Well, okay, well, tell me then, because I don't listen to it. So what's going on in the world?" They're doing this in Iraq, and they're doing that in Iran, and there's a new computer or a new phone, and I'm all ears. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it's dried up. I'm like, well, is that it? What's going on in Iraq and a little bit in Iran, and do you know anything about these? Have you ever been there? Have you ever watched any documentaries about them? No. Just listen to what they tell you, yeah? And that's it, right? That's a fact, yeah? And that's what's going on in the world, right? So I then posed the question, how many countries are there actually in the world? Don't know. Well, have a guess. 100? Well, double that, alright? Double that. Nearly double that. Nearly 200. And what have they been saying about those countries on that idiot box? Nothing. They've just been telling you for weeks and weeks and weeks. This was during the Iraq conflict, That's all it was. And that's all he thought was going on in the world. And I said, don't you think it's very myopic, very stupid and ignorant? You stated you want to know what's going on in the world. Well, if you want to know what's going on in the world, don't ever watch that fucking bullshit again. And just, scout around, the internet, YouTube, and just think about countries I haven't heard of. How many countries are there in the world? Wow! There's 194, really? Oh yeah, well, what are they called? Where are they? This, that and the other. What goes on in there? What sort of cultures? What sort of animals? And all of a sudden, your mind's blown, isn't it? And I think this is one of the things, is because it's vastly too overwhelming for most people. They can't deal with all that. There's just too much. And so they'll just tune in to one channel each day, and that channel will serve them just enough to give them a little bit, thinking that they know something. Because that's all they need, really, just to think that they know something, just to think that they know what's going on in the world. Do they know what's going on in Papua New Guinea? Do they know what's going on in Budapest? Do they know what's going on in Sumeria? Do they know what's going on deep in the jungles in South America? What's going on at this moment in time in these South American countries? Do you know anything about that? No. Has there been a new fossil found, or a new plant, or a new animal? What about when they delve down into the depths of the oceans and finding new life? What about that? That's going on in the world. You don't know anything about that? Yeah. So, then I saw his face getting smaller and smaller and smaller. This is an expression that they have in Africa when people are kind of like embarrassed or shamed or belittled. They say, I say, what did he say when you said that? Oh, his face was small. And so it's kind of like, that's a small face. Well, that's a big face. So that's the difference. And so if he had a small face, then, it's because of that. And so this friend of mine, his face was very small. And when I started to awaken his thoughts to these sort of things, he realised how stupid he was. But he was never going to change. And he felt that that was quite an intimidating and belittling experience for me just to open up the world, the actual world, instead of like, you know, just one tiny little facet, which he thought was the world. And so, what I'm saying is, people, is if you allow those to lead you and manipulate you and fill your minds, then you are going to be put in their hands. But if you are like myself and haven't owned a television in 15 years, barely even looked at one, then I know what's going on out there in a few places as far as what the world leaders are concerned with, because I keep up to date on how they are manipulating the masses and what tactics they're using, but I spend very little time on that. I listen to people who are assessing this sort of stuff, i.e. I listen to a bit of Alex Jones, Russell Brand, David Icke, and then, I don't know, a dozen others, I suppose, you know, here, then, everywhere, just eclectically picking and seeing, you know, what they're speaking about and how they're addressing their viewers and how awoken they are, you know. And like Russell Brand, for instance, it's kind of like, you know all this, you know, because you're Awakened Wonders. And, you know, people that tune into him every day with something new, you know, a couple of times a day, they're having their world built for them. They would never pick up a book like this. They would never delve into the real world, which is their psyche. That's the real world. That's the only world. Because there's nothing actually out there. It's all in here. And when we start educating ourselves about the archetypes and the collective unconscious, we go, oh, are they speaking about archetypes? Oh, look at this archetype, this world leader. It's an archetype. Look at this warmongerer. He's an archetype. Oh, look at this Mother Teresa type person. She's an archetype. You know, devils and angels, people. It's all devils and angels. And so you look at what's going on, you go, it's just a projection of archetypes all the time. Archetypes through and through. You know, the hero and the Superman and, you know, the Dr. Evil. You know, all this sort of stuff. That's all they're doing all the time. And it's no different to any, you know, children's book that you would pick up, where you've got, you know, Wicked Witch of the West, and then you've got, you know, the mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of us all? You are, oh evil one. And, you know, then you've got story about the big bad wolf and all these different sorts of things, where you have these archetypal creatures that are trying to lead you astray and beguile you and all that sort of thing. Well, you see, these children's stories, they're there for a very good reason, and we may think that all these children's stories are quite terrifying because it's all about, you know, monsters at the end of the day. Well, I mean, they are introducing children to a certain reality in the world. Yeah, there's a lot of monsters, and very often they come in the guise of a wolf dressed in a bonnet, you know, Little Red Riding Hood, all that sort of thing. Oh yeah, they come in disguises. They're in disguises all over the place. They're in disguises as pastors, and they're disguised as benevolent world leaders, and, you know, all these people that are supposed to be doing good for the world and protecting you. Well, you know, the vast majority of them are manipulating evil monsters, aren't they? And so the gist is of this video: do you allow the machine to control your life? If you have a television in your house, then the answer is yes. And then you can say, I just watch it for this or just watch it for that. Well, I would say to you, well, do you have it on in the background? Oh, yeah, I have it on in the background. Oh, subliminal hypnosis then. Do you know that's happening? Do you know anything about subliminal hypnosis? If you've got it on, if you need that in your room, then you need that connection. Because it gives you a connection with what's out there, with the world. You think it gives you this connection. When really, it's just keeping you so myopic and tunnel vision and hypnotized and afraid and controlled. So any of you that actually have a television, I can't think why you would ever want one if you was an awoken being. If you want to know something about the world, then you've got the internet. You've got your phone or the computer, haven't you? Why would you have a television? Because you need that. You need that connection with the state. Because subliminally, unconsciously, or even a little bit consciously, you have a certain faith in them. And you want to keep that connection. You don't want to be detached. And so you maintain that. You'll never have that severance. You'll never go it alone. So what do? I get up in the morning and I choose what I want to absorb. I'm not having anybody fill my mind full of shit. I'm going to be choosing what I'm going to be contemplating on. And I've already worked out that it's going to be beneficial to me due to the nature of the information. And so for every minute I spend, I'm gaining. But every minute you're listening to that idiot box, you're losing. You most certainly are losing. You're losing everything that makes you a human being. And you're just turning into programmable matter. So, I spoke in a video a couple of days ago, and I said to you guys, I said, who do you want to be? Have you ever thought about that? And I would think most of you haven't. And a couple responded and said, well, I actually haven't. And then maybe a couple responded and said, well, yeah, kind of this or kind of that. I've often thought about this and I've often thought about that. But how many of you have actually set out to be another you? And I've always maintained that there is no ultimate you. There is no self within you. So if you think there is a person here that's like this and like that, there isn't. Because if you take yourself outside of your current environment, then you will very quickly see that many other facets that you never even saw before, that you don't recognize, come out. Depending on how you're compromised, depending on how excited you are, how stimulated you are. If we just imagine, if we find ourselves in the jungle, what sort of a you is going to come out? Is it going to be a terrified one? Is it going to be an excited one? Is it going to be a botanical one? Is it going to be a naturalistic one? What sort of character is going to emerge from that situation? If you was, let's say, on a beautiful beach holiday and you've got all these semi-naked women walking around, what happens there? Well, we all know what happens there, don't we? All of a sudden, there's shit going on. And you can be there with your partner and your husband, your wife, whatever. But if you've got all that going on, how long could you stand that for? And then, you know, if you've left your own devices, how faithful would you be with that level of tempting and stimulation? Then, if you was in a very negative environment where you felt very threatened, for instance, if you was in an Islamic community, and should you bare your arms in that community, well, you gotta expect some shit coming down on you. And so, well, those people, of course, they're hideously fanatic and evil, when it pertains to their dogma, and so you'd be very wise to exercise great caution in one of those environments. Now, I've been in many environments and I've experienced all different sorts of things, because what I've done in my life is I've looked at the world and I've gone, well look, I'm no particular person, I can be many people. And one day, one year, I decided that I want to be a surfer on Bondi Beach in Australia. And whilst I'm there, well, I may as well go and work in the gold mines and be a gold miner. And then I may as well go be some sort of a naturalist up in the jungles and out on the Barrier Reef. Oh, I want to be a scuba diver. Yeah, and so all of a sudden, I found myself becoming a scuba diver, becoming a qualified scuba diver. I found myself in the jungles, experiencing all these wonderful animals. I found myself in the gold mines. I actually worked in the gold mines. And on one particular occasion, I went into the vault where they poured the gold for that week, and there was 7 bullion, about 5 bullion, this size. And I actually held, you know, one of these bullion, and I tapped in the code to it and put it in the safe just after it had been poured out of this molten barrel into the ingots, you know. So I've done a lot of stuff, and then fossicking for precious gems, opals, and all different sorts of things. And then I thought, well, I want to be sort of like involved in primitive tribes people. And so then I went into the outback of Australia, and I lived on an Aboriginal settlement. I was the only white person living on that settlement. And so I got to see how they lived and how they did it, and communicating, getting involved with them. And so I always used to say that, well, I'm just wearing hats, I'm just becoming people. And so whilst I was working on the Aboriginal settlement, I took a great interest in their art and their artifacts, and I learned to play the didgeridoo, and I exchanged stuff for their hunting weaponry, the boomerangs, the hunting boomerangs, and the clubs, and the spears, and the things that they throw the spears with, and you know, I had a whole collection of these artifacts, and some of them were, you know, I would think a couple of 100 years old, carved out of flint, you know, boomerangs that actually flew through the air on one level, you know, a metre wide, and you throw them through the air, they go whoo, 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 whoo. You see, they're cambered down on one side and then they're cambered up on the other, like a helicopter gyro. And when the Aborigines threw them, they were used for hunting kangaroos, see? And so they wanted them to fly at a particular level. And that's why they were cambered up on one end and cambered down, which counterbalanced and which kept them on an even plane. And I threw this boomerang, which was this thick, wide, and about that thick, and it's cambered over like this, and I could see all the grooves where it had been fashioned with a flint, and how they sent it down there and they sent it up here. It was a work of art. It was genius in itself. It was like a form of aviation. To throw a stick, effectively carved into a hovercraft, which flew at a particular level, the head height for kangaroos. So they throw these across the bush into a group of kangaroos, and hopefully they'd, you know, knock one out or something. And then sitting down and learning how to play the didgeridoo, with the circular breathing, and getting involved in that, and sitting under the moon, in the stars, in the desert, you know, fascinating. So when I speak to you guys about who do you want to be, have you ever been anybody else? Have you ever just took off and said to yourself, I just want to go and do this, or I just want to go and do that? I mean, some people, they take off and they, you know, work for an NGO or something, and they want to, you know, help people here and there, and they want to do this, that and the other. What about just going to work or live on like a Rudolf Steiner farm, you know, with all those natural things going on? You want to do that. What about living for a while on a retreat because you wanted to be a spiritual person? There's a whole bunch of things. You know, many years ago I set out to become proficient in martial arts, and over many years I did. And then I decided that I would like to be a musician and, you know, play guitar and, you know, sing and that, and so then I did. But these things, they all took years. It took years to be able to do that. You got to have tunnel vision, determination. I had a vision of myself being, you know, a proficient musician, and then I became one. I went to see a Bruce Lee movie, right? You know, 73, Enter the Dragon, this sort of thing. Came out of the cinema. That was in 73. I would have only been 10 then. A few years after that, maybe 76 or something, came out of the cinema, and I knew that that was it. I wanted to have that sort of power and fitness. Just awesome skill. And so then joined karate clubs and all those sorts of things, and then went on to fight and represent Great Britain in my style, which was Kyokushin, the strongest full contact karate in the world. And so reaching these levels, and I was a warrior. And I used to fight in world-class tournaments, and I'd fight against the Vikings, which were Norwegian and Swedish, you know, Scandinavian, and they had a real special ethos about being warriors, like the Japanese do. You know, different nations have got a different ethos about this concept of being a warrior. So there's a whole myriad of things to do. But if you are just, what I think it's Napoleon Hill, I think he spoke about this, wrote about it, being a drifter. Someone that's just drifting along in life. They are being pulled and pushed by whatever's happening in their region. And they are never setting a course of their own. They are never becoming their own captain. They are never saying, I'm going to break away from the Armada. I'm going to sail off in my own direction to discover my own lost lands and become somewhat of a Indiana Jones. I've done that. You know, in the pyramids in South America, in Guatemala, climbing these ancient old pyramids, thousands of years old, right in the jungles, with nobody around for miles and miles and miles. And doing all different sorts of potholing in caves 1.5 miles underground. Going underwater through tiny little channels, coming out into huge caverns. And you just got a little spotlight on you like that. And all the stalagmites and stalactites, and some of them are like huge columns that you'd see in a Colosseum or something. Greek or Roman, you know. All glistening with all different sorts of colours on the minerals. I've actually led a fascinating life. And of course, travelling 45 countries, many of which I've lived in and visited many times. So I've been around and I've done a lot of stuff. And there's a depth. And this is why I can maintain that there's no one person in there. There's no self. There's just options. There's just 1 billion options and 1 billion experiences. So hitherto there has been 1 billion experiences premised on the 1 billion options what are out there, and there's still another 1 billion options out there, whether I have the inclination or the energy or the desire to participate in certain things. Like I just decided that I want to climb a mountain. So I climbed the mountain. I set off on my own to Africa to climb a mountain, the unknown, to push myself, to see what I found. And I found something incredible, and it's in the book. So I write about lots of my experiences in the book, near-death experiences, adventures, terrifying and invigorating, and all those sort of things. And you see, people, why I can exhibit a level of frustration. Because I'm kind of like, is there nobody else like me on the planet? There's a few. Yeah, there's a few. You know, people like Bear Grylls. You know, he's done some exciting stuff. You know, he's a real man. You know, he's took the world by the horns and done a bit of that. Yeah. Who else? Who else has done the Indiana Jones thing? You know, gone off to foreign lands in search of treasure, whatever that may be. Usually, the treasure I've been pursuing all my life is the Philosopher's Stone. Realising that it doesn't matter how much gold and riches you can hold in your hands, the ultimate treasure is what you have in your heart. Your memories. And so, going through my life, owning lots of properties, travelling many countries around the world, and just going to a foreign country like Africa or Bulgaria and buying property and building and refurbishing and setting up businesses. And then when I've done it and I'm sitting pretty with a beautiful farmhouse with grapevine and an orchard and everything like that, I just go to myself, well, I've done that now. And so I sold it, everything, all of my royal's possessions, which I took from the UK, in a 40-foot shipping container. All of my beautiful furniture and knickknacks and things I've gathered from my travels around the world. I let it all go. Why? Because it was all in here. I looked around my houses and I saw all the artefacts that I've collected. Like, one of the things I had was a broken paddle, a wooden paddle, which was washed up on one of the islands in the Maldives 2 weeks after the tsunami that happened in Asia and killed thousands of people. Well, I was honeymooning at the time on this tiny island which you could walk around in 10 minutes. And on the day we got there, there's a beautiful pristine beach and it was absolutely gorgeous and idyllic. A few days after, the remnants of the tsunami washed up on that shore. So when we woke up in the morning, went out on the beach, there were massive palm trees that had just been snapped in half like twigs. And there were children's shoes and clothing and all different sorts of things which these people possessed. And then a hand-carved wooden paddle which was snapped in half. And I brought that paddle back and I nailed it to one of my beams in my farmhouse, and I had that there for a few years as a constant reminder of the perils of life and the dangers and how unfortunate people can just lose their lives via an act of God, a natural occurrence. And so all the different sort of things I picked up, I let them all go, because I decided that I couldn't keep dragging those around the world. Why would I want to do that? A 40-foot shipping container here and there, and then would I need 100-foot? Would I need 2 40-foot shipping containers and all that stuff? So I thought, well, I possess them all. I can still remember exactly where I found all this stuff. I used to collect stones and fossils from around the world. small vials of different coloured sands, and I remember from all these beaches and different stones and different artefacts and things like that, and I have a huge collection of those. Just let them all go. In reflection now, I can take myself through finding all of them, because I do have a very proficient memory which can recall a great deal. So, let me close this video. It's just a mind stimulator, really. Just, I mean, you could take it one of two ways. You could take it as like, you know, a very valuable point of assessing where you are. I've never done any of that stuff. I've thought about it, but you know, I've got my mortgage and I've got my kids and I've got my job, I've got my dog. I couldn't go to these jungles and on all these pyramids. Who's going to look after my dog? Really? Or is that just an excuse? You bought the dog to prevent you from doing all that, to give you an excuse. You could consider this video as a prompt that your life is passing you by and you've done nothing. And you've got no idea how many other facets are in you. What sort of people are in you? Like in me, this tribes person that I became, this gold mining person I became, this world adventurer, the businessman I became. You know, I had all the plaited hair and the white suit and, you know, big car and the property and all the nightclubs and all the girls and all that sort of stuff. And then, a few years later, I've just got some tattered old shorts on and a beard and, you know, hair, and I'm out in the bush, in the wilderness, sleeping on the beach and got nothing. No possessions, nothing. Just a few clothes in the bag. But money in the bank. This thing is a journey, people. It's an incredible journey. And this is why I always make videos about, this is a blast. All these people speaking about, oh, this is the lowest dense and dimension, and I'm not coming back here again. And I'm, you know, really? I think you're being very deluded. I really do. I think you're being deluded. Some bullshit you've heard somewhere that said some crap. And it's like all this stuff with religion, how, you know, they don't live their life here. Oh, I'm a sinner. We're all sinners and we're corrupt human beings. And I just want to go back to Jesus. Fucking hell. I say in the book, I tell you in the book what hell is. I tell you what heaven is. And I tell you exactly why I say this. Through my experience, through my own intellectual deciphering of all these religious and spiritual scriptures against my humanisms, my consciousness. What do I make of it? What have I made of it? And I'm telling you now, people, it's got hardly anything to do with any of that stuff I've ever read. And that's why I'm saying that my book could very well be considered to be the spiritual Bible. Because I will take you from hell into heaven within those pages. You'll travel around the world. You'll encounter a myriad of experiences. Some terrifying, some ecstatically, incredibly beautiful. It's all in there. And so this book, apparently it's going to be released on the 15th. A couple of days away. Monday. So, as soon as that happens, I'll let you know. But in the interim, who do you want to be? Who have you been before? If you've only ever been you, what's the chance of you being anybody else? Oh, yeah, I went to school, went to college, I got qualified as this, I've got a job, it's a good job, and I've got a mortgage, and I've got a nice car, and I go on nice holidays, yeah, and... Is that you? Really, is that you? Or is that just a program? That's just what you've been told to do. What do you want to do? Who do you want to be?